the follow up off of this, because we obviously know with this we did have information that came from the NFL pertaining directly to this situation, obviously around the games and the playoff ramifications, because we know a lot was riding on that Bills and Bengals game. So we did get it somewhat of an update earlier today. If you want to go ahead and do that again.
Wow. Okay, so I don't know if the tweet I just saw is necessarily verified. I gotta say it because ML Football says breaking. Oh, I guess this is from Pro Football Talk. I'm sorry, I'm confusing myself here. He says the NFL is talking about adding an 8th team to the AFC playoffs, and there will be no bye in the AFC, according to Pro Football Talk.
So 8-team AFC, no bye.
I'm sorry, that's the one I'm just too excited about right now because
honestly, it makes the most sense.
But I could talk about more. There's other stuff they got going on with the Bills Bengals game too.
Yeah. So first, let's do this then. Is it all right there easily for you to?
Yeah, I got it.
So list off all of it first, and then we'll go back and hyper focus on each one of them.
This was a couple hours ago.
Yeah.
Here's a look at where things currently stand as to the scheduling. No Bills Bengals game. I think that's pretty much confirmed. There's a lot of reports coming out. It's just going to be no contest, essentially. And then they'll base the standings off win percentage.
Yes.
Because the Bills and the Bengals will have one last game. 2, NFL figuring out what to do with AFC seeding. 3, potential neutral site for the AFC Championship. 4, expansion of playoff fields to 8 teams in AFC, NFC is possible.
So man, let's tap into this thing, man. First thing, the no bye week, add 8 teams AFC. I think that off the initial reaction, I thought that was the best decision or best proposition, because number one, there's multiple teams that are still fighting for that 7th playoff spot, and if we're talking about the league continuing on while still not penalizing people for a just unfortunate and tragic event, I do think the expansion for this season specifically would make sense, because you at least, whether it's teams like us, whether it's teams like the Jets, whether it's teams like, I think it's the Dolphins as well, the Patriots, all these other teams that are fighting for that final spot, all of us essentially don't get that opportunity to really, see it come to fruition if that game doesn't have some type of stake, or if that game isn't played. So at least in this capacity, it will at least allow, of the group of guys fighting for that final spot, a legitimate opportunity without at the same time pushing the Bengals or Bills to go back into a very traumatic situation just for the sake of standings. So I did like that. And then I think when they talk about the no bye week, I think that's right also, because if your team didn't actually earn that 1 seed, then no, you shouldn't have the bye week. That's just how it goes. And we knew only one of those teams were going to get that, but it was truly a coin flip when you talk about Kansas City, Buffalo, and Cincinnati. All 3 of those teams are on that same playing field based on what we had seen from them this season. So I think it's fair for all 3 of them under the circumstances.
Yeah.
And even going to the neutral site AFC Championship game, I low key like that as well. Now, granted, I would be a little bit tempted to wait to see what the matchup is,
right?
Because if it's a clear seed discrepancy, then I would just rather go winning percentage host. But if it's a scenario where it is a Bills Chiefs or Bills Bengals Chiefs, something like that,
3.
Right? If it's one of those teams, then I do think it's appropriate to do a neutral site, so that way you're not penalizing one of those 3 teams for this situation that that happened.
I think it just makes common sense.
Yeah, like I said, I like that a lot, man. If that is what they go with, I don't see a lot of, at least from my perspective, I don't see a lot of issues with it.
No, I don't either. I think it's an incredible idea. That way, that final playoff seed for the AFC, for that 7th seed, isn't dependent on what the Bills do or not do.
Yeah.
Because there might be some players in this Bills-Patriots game. I saw some reports that they can sit out. It's almost it's almost like the COVID situation.
Yes, they got the option now. Yeah.
So, it puts no pressure on the Bills, and it leaves the other teams that are looking for that 7th seed, it leaves them not looking for anything from that Bills game.
Yep.
Now it just literally comes down to you taking care of business. And if anything, your chances to make it just increase a little bit more.
And the other thing that I thought of with this situation is, obviously when we talk just how big of a deal it is to host games. You know what I mean? Like, we know the energy when we're hosting in Pittsburgh for playoffs, and we know what it feels like to go on the road. I think of distinctly us hosting playoff games in Pittsburgh, us or us going on the road to Kansas City, and then us going on the road to New England, and what those situations felt like. It is an advantage, when you have a game at home. Absolutely it is. And then if we're talking, just the business side of it, yeah, I believe you get more money when you're hosting a game on top of that, because you got concession, stadium, parking, all that type of stuff as well, right? But
Yeah.
I just think in this scenario, all of those teams, especially the big three that are most impacted by that home field advantage, by that one seed, I think all three of them are very understanding of the scenario, especially with two of those teams directly being impacted in the stadium when it happened, when you're talking Cincinnati and Buffalo. So I think both of them were going to be on board with this type of decision, even if it meant them not hosting, even if it meant them losing money, even if it meant them potentially having a competitive disadvantage, because you're not, even if it's a neutral site, you're just not at the crib. Dude, everybody loves to play at the crib, man. I love to wake up in my bed next to my wife. I play better that way. You know what I mean? Versus when I'm in a hotel, you sleeping a little all erratic. What's the time zone?
Who
food?
knows what the Patriots are doing? They're setting
Yeah.
alarms off at your hotel.
You know what I mean? And that's real. So in that capacity, I do think that, like I said, all three of those teams, in terms of Cincy, Buffalo, and Kansas City, I don't think that they're looking at that as, man, we got to have a hard stance to really host this because we're losing out on that, when they understand this is such a outlier situation. If this was a commonality, if this is something that we see happen frequently, and there was like, there are other things in place, other alternatives, I think it's a different approach. But this is such a outlier. This is such a one-off. And you are still towing that line of business versus human, When you talk about the option for guys to play this week, they were having a walkthrough in Buffalo yesterday, because you can't put them dudes back out there and just expect them to go practice, because mentally and emotionally it's too much right now. And that's something that all those guys are having to process through and get it figured out. You even heard Joe Burrow when he spoke on it, what those past 48 hours have been for him. And that's the thing, that as much as we're starting to get the machine back up and running again, that part still can't get lost in this either, when we're talking about the significance of playing these games and why they need to do it. And it's not right to have nobody hosting. You have to have a hard one seed. That's the part where we don't want to lose sight of, because we will easily forget those real human feelings that are still very much at play here. Even with that positive report, that still does not say that he is up playing and everything is all grand and fine. So all of that is still on the table. So that's just the one thing that we should all just make sure we're a little bit more sensitive and understanding for, as well as we proceed, with these updates and stuff like that on the football side.
Agreed. And I think it feels like everyone involved here is doing a pretty good job of just looking out for each other, making sure everyone's okay. Because you're right, life got to move on still. The machine does eventually got to move on, but at the same time, can we do it in a way where we're looking out for each other? And I feel like that's what we're doing in a way. And the whole thing about the seating,
give and take, so to speak, man.
Right. The seating and maybe not having a home field advantage for the AFC Championship game, playing it at a neutral site, not playing the Bills-Bengals game, including the 8th team. I think it does. It can do everything, where it's still cognizant of the Bills and Bengals who are involved in that Monday night game. Still cognizant of all that. But then also it's even being fair to the other teams that have worked their asses off all year that are fighting for the 7th seed too. I just feel like, I feel like they're going in the right direction with this. We'll obviously be interested to see what they come to for their final conclusion. But if that's like the premise right there, I'm really liking that. I really am.
Like I said, I didn't see a lot of issue with it, man, because it's never going to be perfect. Somebody is going to get slighted in some way, and somebody's going to get an advantage in some way. There are going to be people making the case that if the Steelers get into the postseason, we got lucky because of this rule. If that is the case, I mean, it's a one-off. So, okay, it is what it is. But I just think that that's the compromise that the NFL and the brotherhood of the players and the coaches and the organizations, I think that's just them coming together and saying, I don't care about what the fans might say. I don't care about what the media. I don't care about the money part of it. Let's do what's best for us. And I think that's what this approach is. And as a competitor who's been on, the side where you're fighting for that 1 seed or you're fighting for that bye week, have the bye week. And on the other side where you're sneaking in as that last team to get into the wild card and you got to win that last game and get help outside the stadium. I just think that this balances it out with the situation that is currently at hand, man.
Yeah, an unprecedented situation. So you make adjustments.
Absolutely.
You make common sense decisions. I think that's what this is, because maybe there's some complaints out there to, oh, man, some of the teams that were out of it last week, they sat some players, and now all of a sudden there's an 8th seed, and they would still be in it. You know what I mean? If they wouldn't have done certain things over the last couple weeks. I mean, that's just whatever, man. Like no one was predicting this to happen. So it happened. Yeah. It's new information. Then now you make adjustments, and this is, in my opinion, the most common sense way to go about it.
Yeah, and I think if the situation was like finished in the sense that he was already recovered out the hospital, I think it's a different scenario. But because it's still such a high sensitivity, a high, just touch and go scenario. Yeah, if he's recovered, if it was different, I think you're right. They would go ahead and play it. But because it's still so touch and go, I mean, you see how we just reacting off of just him saying he opened his eyes and was grabbing a hand. You know what I mean? Like, that's still, when you're talking about the journey, that's like the beginning stage is still in that capacity. But I think that's also why this is being handled as it's been, because of that. It's still very fluid. It's still, just a lot riding on, his recovery right now.
Anything else with that? I don't think there's any new information out right now. I'm not seeing anything. What do you think of the potential 8th NFC team?
So initially,
it would be bad. I mean, it could be. I mean, that'd be interesting because it'd be either like the Seahawks, Lions, or Packers. Those are all interesting teams. Right there.
I don't hate it. I think you balance it out. It's cool. I think if you make that stance that there's no bye week AFC because of the 8th playoff team, then I think you might need to do something like that NFC. But once again, I think now you might be flirting with penalizing the NFC side of it. But then at the same time,
Eagles are collapsing anyway.
Well, I just think like all the NFC teams though right now that are vying for it, it's just kind of like, man, we've done this to put ourselves in this position, and this isn't even in our conference. But that's the weird dynamic with this, because if you make it on the AFC side, it's not like we're just talking regular season. We're talking Super Bowl now. We're talking competing for that. And you getting that bye week can be the difference between your guy just being 70% healthy versus my guy being 50% healthy. And that's the difference in this game. So, that's going to be interesting though, man. I don't hate it.
I'm fine with it either way.
Yeah, if they make it fair and do 8 teams, NFC and AFC, no bye week, and make everybody run the gauntlet, I'm down with it, because this is clearly a one-off, once in a lifetime, hopefully, situation. If they also decided to just say we're only going to make this new amendment for the AFC for this season and leave the NFC as it is, I would understand that as well, and I would just simply say luck of the draw. You can't determine what conference stuff like this might happen in, or when tragedy might strike, and tragedy is never
we're all
convenient.
in this together as a league, and that's the NFL.
Tragedy is never convenient. It's not like it tells you, hey man, we're going to schedule it for this day at this time. You got all your ducks in a row, everybody good. It don't always work like that. Sometimes it just happens, and I think right now that's the pivot and the adjustments that are being made off of it. But yeah, collectively, man, I think they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, man, in terms of handling it at a good pace and with good sensitivity.